Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Memory Techniques workshop. My name is Cynthia. Happy to see you in the audience today. Thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel, Learning Blueprint. If you do enjoy the content, please like, subscribe to the channel. We would appreciate your support. Today's workshop is brought to you by Iris Reading, a company that is based out of Chicago. Iris Reading has been teaching speed reading, memory technique workshops, note-taking workshops for a pretty long time, but they're actually known for their speed reading workshop. That one has actually been taught in over 100 cities around the world. So we are obviously very proud of that. Today we will be talking about memory, which happens to be my favorite subject and my favorite workshop offered by Iris Reading. If you have any questions, please feel free to either shoot me an email or leave your comments or concerns or questions in the chat. This will be available for future use. So if you're watching this later on, you can still send in questions. You can obviously check our website, irisreading.com, to submit any questions on there as well. Want to quickly share, we also have social media. So 2023 was the year we decided to jump on to Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So if you do enjoy the material, you want to see what we're doing. For example, in March of this year, we decided to surprise our participants or our followers with a brand new workshop. And they kind of had exclusive access to that if they were following us on YouTube already. So that brand new workshop was called, or is called, Comprehension Strategies. So we're talking about asking all of the questions that we probably don't even know we should be asking when we're learning something brand new. So if you would like to maybe stick around and see if we are able to air that live on this channel, you are more than welcome to, again, hit that like, hit that subscribe button so you can see what's coming new in 2023. Iris Reading's Instagram, we post different things on there, specifically maybe libraries, beautiful libraries that we find around the world. We've been playing around with a trivia or a fact of the day type of thing, lesser known facts to maybe impress your friends. So, things that your average person maybe is aware of, but, a small detail, like a fun fact on that. So you can find that there at our Iris Reading TikTok. We've been, kind of just going around, whether it's our community or different areas around the U.S., just kind of picking something and doing a little bit of research and learning a little bit more about it. So this past weekend, we were at a Memorial Day parade in the very small town of Huntley, Illinois. It was really nice to see, how the small town observes this, and we learned a lot about Memorial Day, specifically here in this town. And our Facebook, we have a book club, and it is called Book Lovers Assemble. And so we talk about all things related to reading, whether that be things that people do with books that annoy you, or maybe a book that you're reading right now that you enjoy, or maybe you don't like it, or you find it a waste of time. This week, I am actually reading, I've been finishing up a book I purchased by the comedian Joey Coco Diaz, and it is called Tremendous. So I think the book is actually called Tremendous, The Life of a Comedy Savage. So it's been a really funny book to read. I don't typically go for that kind of book. I'm more of a historical fiction type of person, but the book has had me laughing throughout like 90% of it, and I have about a chapter left, so we'll be reviewing that book probably by the end of the day today. So that is our social media. That's a taste of what you will expect if you join the Iris Reading family on social media. Again, that's also a great way to get a hold of us as well. It is synchronized to our devices, so if you want to send me a direct message, if you don't want to send an email, you have a question, anything like that, you are more than welcome to reach out that way as well. Now, we are now going to jump into memory, and what we do is we tie in the tail end of speed reading with this memory workshop, because you're going to notice, for one, we offer, as I mentioned in the beginning, speed, memory, note-taking, comprehension strategies, forgot to mention productivity and focus. And we make them all one big family. So we don't treat them as like independent areas of reading and learning. We sandwich it all together. So you'll notice that because we're tying in the tail end of speed, you'll notice how that actually starts to affect your memory as well. Okay, so in the speed reading workshop, again, you are more than welcome to check it out if you maybe want to be a little bit more of a productive reader, a little bit of a better reader. We talk about inspecting. Okay, and I won't spoil it for you, but I will say that it's really important for us to inspect anything we need to read before we actually read it. Some people call this pre-reading. We call it inspecting, and you'll notice in a moment why. What we did in that speed reading workshop that just went live yesterday, I mean, it's been around since 2013, but we were live on YouTube yesterday with that. And we inspected an article just to kind of prove the importance of inspecting. And we read the first sentences of each paragraph here. Now, after reading those first sentences, you would glean all of the main ideas. So if we're getting all of the main ideas in this article, doesn't it make sense that you'd have a pretty good idea of what to expect, right? So it helps us with our comprehension. It also helps us with our focus as well. If we are easily distracted or maybe not in the mood to read something in that time, or maybe you just don't like to read, period, inspecting can really give you a boost. We also talk about inspecting a chapter out of a textbook. So if you are a college student, you maybe are primed to read the chapter from beginning to end. It's kind of like that's beat into us since we're in like grade school, right? We're told we should not read ahead, we should not look ahead, just read all the way through, and that is how you are supposed to read. I remember my first grade teacher, her name was Ms. Reisman, she would say that don't read the end. But what happens is that we get bored sometimes, right? We're not interested all the way through. So how do we get the most benefit out of it when we're not necessarily enjoying what we're reading? So inspecting, again, really, really good. We're talking about looking at the intro, headings and subheadings, words in bold and or italics, the titles of charts, tables, and diagrams, the conclusion, as well as any questions that may be published in this piece. So all of this you want to look at before you actually start to read the chapter. Okay, gives you a nice idea of what to expect. Now, we are going to just quickly do a brief inspection of this book, Brain Rules. And it's a great book, by the way, in case you're looking for something to read, John Medina's 12 Principles for Surviving and Thriving at Work, Home, and School. Right? I think he has brain rules for babies, brain rules for teens, brain rules for adults, older adults. It's a great book. So if we inspected brain rules together, you would notice that at the end of each chapter, there is what is called a chapter summary. Not every book has this, but Brain Rules does, right? So it's just a little paragraph summarizing the entire chapter. So we would, if we're inspecting, we would read through all of those chapter summaries. And you'll also notice, if you happen to have the book or if you purchase the book, that the book is actually 300 pages long. If we were to read all of those chapter summaries, they are spread out across 12 pages, but we're actually going to shrink that down to 6 pages, seeing that the paragraph is really not that big, so we didn't think it'd be fair to count it as a full page. So we brought that down to 6. And if we're calculating correctly, if we're reading all of those chapter summaries again, that means we would have read about 2% of the book just by reading the chapter summaries. But would you say that you would only get 2% worth of the information? No, right? We get a lot more for reading all of the chapter summaries. I mean, some people, I had a participant a couple years ago say that she survived college, or she passed college by reading Spark Notes, and like that was it. She was just reading summaries off of there's one more website I think that will offer Cliff Notes or something like that, right? So you get a lot from the summary, right? I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying summaries give us a lot of information. So a lot more than 2%. And that brings to light the importance, or it actually showcases this 80-20 principle and how great it is for reading and learning. So we don't want anybody, now you might be familiar with 80-20. I know that like counselors use it, marriage counselors, like coaches, they talk about the 80-20 principle, but we're actually going to apply it in the field again of reading and memorizing and learning, and how if you are studying, we don't want you to study for, let's say, 3 hours and only remember 20% of what you reviewed in those 2 hours. That would be pretty awful, right? We want you to go the other way around. We want you to study for 20% of your time and remember 80% of what you reviewed, okay? But as students, maybe we catch ourselves sometimes just kind of going over all this information and not even remembering a handful of things sometimes. And I'll also share, I am a student myself. I am going after, with everything I have, a PhD in educational psychology. So I am very, very invested in how we best learn, and I've just used myself as an example because I was a terrible student in high school, a very, very bad one. I thought that I would get pretty far in college with my high school study strategies, and I learned very quickly that just wasn't going to work. Okay, first semester of nursing school was a nightmare for me because I had no idea how to read. I knew how to read, but I didn't know how to read, and get something out of it. I was just kind of skimming through the material. I had no idea how to take the best notes that work for me, and my memory techniques, my memory strategies, I didn't even know that you were supposed to have some, right? So you might identify with that. You might be like, I don't have a plan for memorizing anything. Well, if you're a student, that is what today's workshop is for. So if we are maybe reading something class, we probably have to memorize it or remember some of it for the exam later, right? Or for a presentation. So when we're talking about memory, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Well, for many of us, it's the fact that the more you do something, in theory, it is supposed to stay in your memory for longer, right? But here's the thing, here's the pickle with the situation, is that the more you do something, yes, it should stay in your memory, but we have to make it meaningful repetition. So it's not just read the same 6 sentences over and over again until you can pretty much regurgitate what you've been reading. That's not memorization. That's actually called rote repetition. So it's spelled R-O-T-E. And it's fancy word, rote, just a fancy word for mindless repetition. So we don't want to do that. And a perfect example of this, I'm not sure if you've ever watched like on YouTube fails of people singing the Star Spangled Banner, for example, like at a sporting event, whether it be for the Super Bowl or for a baseball game, or if you've ever Googled this or checked it out on YouTube, it's pretty sad to see some of these celebrities that were born and raised in the U.S. grew up singing this. If you were born and raised in the U.S., every morning you'd have to sing the Star Spangled Banner. You'd have to pledge allegiance to the flag, right? This is something you do every morning for like 9-10 years, right? So if you grew up doing this, you would think that it's actually stuck in your memory. It's memorized correctly. But for some of these celebrities, that was not the case, and it was pretty awful to watch them completely forget the words to the song in front of thousands of people. So rote repetition, not cool, all right? We do not want you to do the mindless repetition. It's not going to take you anywhere. You might recognize what you're seeing, but you're not actually, it's not in your memory, okay? So that introduces the IRIS method. We are IRIS reading. I did say you'll notice why we call it inspecting and not pre-reading. It is because we have a fancy acronym or with our company name, following the 4-step process to better reading and learning, and pre-reading just didn't fit because then it would be PRIS, and I think IRIS sounds better. So I for inspecting, anything you need to read before you read it. It's when you decide if this is something that you want to read or not. So that's the second step. Maybe you inspect it and you're like, you know what? This has nothing to do with anything. Okay, so then you decide maybe you're not going to read it. Okay, or the other way around. So that's inspect, read. Then we want you to ask questions, all of the questions. And if you're like, well, I don't even know what to start with, remember we mentioned launching that brand new comprehension workshop. So if you're not sure what questions you should be asking, for example, like me, when I was in nursing school, I had no idea, none whatsoever. I did not have anybody in my family that was a medical professional. I don't even know where in my head, at what period of time I decided I wanted to be a nurse. I don't think I really understood what that was, right? So it was incredibly challenging 3.5 years to get through that, and so I wasn't sure what kinds of questions to ask. And so that presentation we created, we have actually dug out 6 generic questions that you can ask to help you better understand a subject, any subject, okay? And then we want you to obviously be able to answer those questions you're asking, and then move on to the final step, which is either writing it down or trying to memorize it. Okay, so this is what we call our study cycle, or the IRIS method. But unfortunately, we have noticed that some students, they kind of just wing it. They read, and then they try to memorize what they read, and then they try to understand what they memorized from what they read, and then they try to make a note based on their, it's just a mess, right? So we want you to have a plan that works. And so this has actually worked really well for, dare I say, hundreds and hundreds of people that have taken our workshop. So give it a go, give it a try. Again, this is the IRIS method. Now, we are talking again about memory. So we want to first understand how our memory works before we try to smash information into our memory, right? Most of us, for example, when you learn how to drive a car, you don't just jump in and start driving. You first have to understand the gas pedal, the brake, right? You have to know how to go in reverse. You have to know how to put your emergency lights on, how to use the windshield wipers. You don't just jump into the car and start driving. So you need to understand how the vehicle works. The same thing with our memory. You can't just push in front. You can't just go run with your memory. You have to understand first what works, what doesn't work, right? Okay, so we are actually going to share that with you right now. A couple things that affect your memory, and then we'll tie it all together and do an actual memory, like we'll try to memorize something together based on everything we've learned. And I'm curious to see how many of you are actually able to keep it all in your memory. But for the most part, we have noticed that individuals are very successful when applying these memory principles. So the first one is visualization. Okay, we want you to actively visualize what you are reading. And if you can't visualize it because you've never seen something like this, then use your imagination. Okay, use your imagination. You'd be surprised how that stays in your memory for a very long time. Pull information from the context to create some kind of picture. All right, we obviously know that your visualization may not be accurate, but it's gonna come pretty close. Okay, and the act of pulling information from the text to form some kind of picture is actually a form of repetition, meaningful repetition, like we talked about in the beginning. If you've ever wondered why we forget names but remember faces, again, visuals are just easier for us to remember. right? Visual recall is better than verbal recall, meaning that, again, images, they just stay in your memory for longer. If I say McDonald's to you right now, what will you see? The golden arches, or will you see the actual word McDonald's? You'd find that most people will see the golden arches, or they'll maybe see the red fry container that you get when you go to McDonald's, right? Or something else that McDonald's has, like the clown. That is what we'll see. Most people do not think in full sentences, okay? Or rather, most people are not what we call linear thinkers, so they don't think in a linear fashion, which makes sense that we tap into these visuals. All right, now what are some other things that influence our memory? Well, we have a string of numbers right now on the screen, and then we take them away and we ask if you can remember all 10 digits. Now, the purpose of this is to showcase something else that's very important. There are two departments in your memory. So there is the short-term memory and there's the long-term memory, okay? And most of us, especially if we're unaware of how our memory works, we maybe feel like, okay, we learn some obscure fact, and then if we're able to repeat it 5 minutes later, many people confuse that for having it successfully committed to your memory, and that's not the case. Mr. Miller, we'll call him, he wrote a paper, and his paper was called Miller's Magic Number 7, with a subheading of plus or minus 2. So it's a really long title for a paper, but the point is that he discovered that your average person is able to keep in their short-term memory 7 things plus or minus 2. So that means anywhere from 5 to 9 things you can keep in your memory, in your short-term memory. Simplifying that even further, if I was to tell you to go to the grocery store and I was to say, hey, I need you to bring me back tomatoes, lettuce, bagels, lax, at what point would you say, you know what, Cynthia, just text me because I'm actually not going to remember any of that. Right? For some of us, maybe 3 things. For some of us, 5 things. For some of us, no things. And that's okay. But it's important to distinguish that the short-term memory is kind of like that temporary holding cell, I guess you can say, in your memory chamber, okay, and then we want to transfer that over to long-term memory. So this is that same string of numbers. Now, if I was to maybe give you 5 minutes to try to memorize this, it wouldn't be too challenging because we actually recognize how this is written out. This is a phone number, right? And that method of breaking things down, we call it chunking. We find that to be a nice, fun way of describing breaking something down. Other individuals may refer to this as fragmenting, but the point is that we are breaking something down to its finer details. So, for example, again, with the sad nursing stories of my past, when I was in nursing school, I would just try to memorize these really big, complicated nursing processes, and I wouldn't necessarily be too concerned with how they affected the patient, how they affected me, why they were set in place. I didn't care. I just wanted to memorize it so that I could pass the exam. Right? And that's not a good thing because that's pretty much like memorizing something that's really big but also really empty. And who benefits from that? Right? So I had to break it down to understand the who's, the what's, the where's, the when's, and the why's. And then once I understood it, I could memorize it. Okay? Now you can apply that to something as big and spicy as a nursing process, or you could shrink it down to something as simple as trying to spell the word Wednesday. Most of us still have to sound out Wednesday. We got to go Wednesday to actually spell it correctly. Okay, so keep that in mind when you are trying to memorize something, please. Now, again, I said if we were to give you maybe 3, 4 minutes, 5 minutes to memorize this, you wouldn't have a problem. But another thing that affects our memory is association. Okay, so we want you to associate what you are learning with what you already have in your brain. Most of us have a lot of things we've been through, right? Maybe we went through a lot just to be on Zoom today. Maybe you spilled your coffee, the dog was barking at a squirrel, your kid, somebody fell in the toilet. I mean, things happen in the morning, right? It's just a normal routine. We all have our morning routine. So we got a lot of things going on in our brains, in our memories. So we want to tie that back to something. When we're learning, we want to tie it back to something we have seen in the past, in that day, you know, whatever. Okay, so how would we associate to this phone number? Okay, what if I told you, listen, I don't need you to memorize the whole number, I just want you to memorize the area code, 312. Okay, so you might be thinking, okay, what do I have in my life that is has some kind of 312? Maybe the PIN to my debit card, which is not the PIN to mine, in case anyone was wondering. Maybe it's the combination to your gym lock. Maybe it's the combination to get into your cell phone. Maybe you have nothing that you can tie back 312 to. So what do we do then? Well, we then have to dig a little deeper. So let's think about this. And you don't have to share if you'd like to, you can drop it in the chat, but I'm curious if anyone in the audience happens to know which area code in the world, or what city in the world has a 312 area code, okay? 312 is actually an area code based out of Chicago. Okay, Chicago. So when we think about Chicago, what is the first thing that you think of immediately? Maybe you think of deep dish pizza, you think of the Cubs, you think of what are some other things? I was just researching Memorial Day, like just lesser known facts about Memorial Day, and it turns out that the bloodiest or worst Memorial Day actually happened in Chicago in like the 1930s. Surprise, surprise. But anyway, that's something that I learned, or I think about when I think about Chicago. Maybe think about the fact that it's the Windy City and it's always cold. It's cold like 10 out of the 12 months. We only have about 60 days of summer in Chicago. Maybe you think about that deep dish pizza. There's a lot of things that we tie back to Chicago, right? Maybe we think about the fact that it's not the safest city. So, you know, we just think of a few things, right? So now that we've got all this beautiful list of things that are, you know, in relation to Chicago, now we can tie that back to our area code. It's like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. So you think, okay, she said something about Chicago. We were just thinking about, oh, it was the area code. Oh, it was 312. So remember, it's like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for your memory. Okay. Most of us want to remember things immediately, but the truth is that we're not able to do that. However, what we can do is kind of assist our memory with leaving little trails to what we actually, you know, are trying to memorize. And a great example of how this association is really, really effective is the Baker-Baker effect. Okay, so this study that was conducted a while back, two groups of students participated in this study. First group of students, they were introduced to a picture of a man, maybe like this, I'm not sure, but they were told that this guy's name was Mr. Baker. Okay, and they were given random facts about Mr. Baker, you know, like, I don't know what his favorite coffee is or things like that. At the end of the study, those that were participating in the study were asked some random questions about this gentleman, and they said, okay, do you remember this about him? Do you remember that about him? And then they said, do you happen to remember what this guy's name is? And hardly anyone actually could remember that his name was Mr. Baker. Okay, now the second group of students were introduced to a picture of a guy like this one. They were given, again, random facts about him, and they were told that he is a baker, or that he works as a baker. Okay, so at the end of the study, again, they're asking questions. Hey, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Cool. They said, do you happen to remember what this guy does for work? And so many more were able to remember that he worked as a baker. Now, why this? Because the occupation of a baker is easier to remember than the not super exciting name of Mr. Baker. Let's be honest, it's nothing, it's not that exciting, right? But when you think of an actual baker, what are some things that you think of, right? You think of bread, you think of cookies, you think of muffins, you think of maybe cannoli, you think of baklava, conchas. There's lots of things. I can think of a million things. I love bread, like Oprah said. But maybe you don't eat bread, so you stay away from a baker. The point is that the occupation of a baker actually means more to you than just the flat fact of someone whose last name is Baker. Okay, so it taps into your senses almost. If you think of a baker, maybe you smell your favorite pastry. Maybe you smell walking into the bakery section of Costco. Right? Doesn't it smell glorious with all that butter and sugar in the air? I love it. So again, that is again to showcase how associations are really powerful, and we want to use that when we're trying to memorize something. Now, some other things that have influenced our memory. We actually remember things that are weird, right? That just happens. So many people have tried to explain to me what he has to do with McDonald's, Mr. Ronald McDonald. I don't get it though, right? So it's just it's weird to me. Maybe to someone else, not so much. I grew up mortified of Ronald McDonald's. I never, ever wanted to see him. I did not like the colors. I didn't like the costume. I didn't like any of it. And so to this day, he haunts me. So I never understood what he has to sweat. All over the world, people recognize who he represents. That stays in place. What are some other things that are weird? Well, the polar bears from Coca-Cola. They should not be drinking Coca-Cola, right? And who was brave enough to try to put a scarf on this animal, right? I thought that polar bears were not the nicest creatures. So we do not want to, we don't want to just think in ordinary terms. We want to make things weird by, again, spicing them up when we're learning something. Okay. The gecko also is a bit strange. So if you are from the US, we do have an insurance company here in the US called Geico, and their mascot, or their little, he is I would imagine maybe like 3-4 inches tall gecko with an Australian accent, and he walks the streets of America selling insurance, car insurance, renter's insurance, boat insurance. It's weird because again, if he's a talking gecko, in Chicago, I don't think that this poor gecko would be able to walk and talk, because I don't think he would make it any more than 3 seconds. But the point is, again, these marketing companies, they create these characters that are, they're exaggerated because they know that it's easy to remember. And the funny thing is that individuals who maybe have nothing to do with the product or the service, they may not necessarily understand the service, but they do remember who this character is supposed to be representing. Okay, like 12-year-olds who do not drive, they are aware of Martin the talking gecko from Geico. It just stays in your memory. So we want to use this as we're memorizing something, okay? So again, we talked about how our memory works. And here's our iris method one more time. We are now going to try to memorize. Remember the brain rules list that we had settled on, or the brain rules list that we had shared at the beginning? The book, we said we would read through all of the chapter summaries, and that if we were calculating correctly, that would be about 2% of the book, right? So what if I told you now that we're going to put in practice everything we've talked about up until this point, and we are actually going to memorize this 12-item list, okay? We're going to tie in association. We're going to tie in, obviously, repetition. We're going to make things weird. That is what I want you to keep at the forefront of this exercise. We have to keep it weird. If we keep it ordinary, it will not stay in your memory, okay? So here we go. We're going to use the numeric peg system to commit this to memory, okay? Maybe 1 year from now, I'll send you an email and say, hey, can you remember those 10 things we tried to memorize? And you'd be surprised how many of you are able to write back with everything, okay? So as we're doing this, if you want to close your eyes, you can. The point is that I need you to actively visualize what I am describing to you. So pull things from your imagination. Okay, so in order for numeric peg system to work, we have to first assign an object to represent the number it will replace. Okay, so can we all agree that number 1 looks like a pencil? Okay, number 1 looks like a pencil. So I want you to close your eyes if you would like. You don't have to, but close your eyes and try to visualize number 1 as the pencil. Maybe you're visualizing a yellow pencil, maybe you're visualizing a mechanical pencil, maybe some of us are visualizing a feather as a pencil. It doesn't matter, as long as we have a pencil, we're visualizing that, okay? Number 2, we're going to visualize the swan, and the swan will represent the number 2. So we've got the curve in the neck of the swan is like the curve in the neck of the 2. Okay, so that is our swan. Number 2 is the swan, so visualize that. And I disabled my webcam again so we can focus on these images on the screen. Again, if you want to close your eyes, you're more than welcome to do that. Number 3 is the sideways McDonald's sign. So we are visualizing a McDonald's sign that looks like it was toppled over by the wind. I mean, this McDonald's sign was in Chicago, and it is known as the Windy City. So this sideways McDonald's sign is here representing the number 3. So close your eyes and see if you can visualize that. And of course, it looks like a number 3, right? Okay, so number 3 is the sideways McDonald's sign. Number 4 is the upside down chair. Okay, and so most of us probably write our 4s like this anyway. Maybe you write them like this, but we can see a number 4 here. Okay, and number 5 is the pirate's hook. Okay, so we've got the curve in the hook, we've got the curve in the 5. So this is our number 5, our pirate's hook. All right, here we go. We are going to try to remember all 5 of these items, okay? If you'd like to participate, you can drop your answers in the chat as we do this together. Here we go. So number 1, who can remember what the object was for number 1? Now, I have closed my eyes as well. I'm not sure why, but number 1 is the pencil, right? So if you want to write your answers out on a piece of paper, you can do that. If you want to type them in the chat, you can do that. Okay, hopefully no one wrote this down beforehand. Number 2 was the swan, right? Number 2 was the swan. Very good. Number 3, what was number 3? Number 3 was the sideways McDonald's sign, right? Very good. Number 4, what was number 4? Number 4 was the upside down chair, right? Excellent. And number 5 was the pirate's hook. Okay, so very good job. Hopefully this was easy to remember, again, because we are visualizing, and this is taking a form. This is like a repetition, okay, a form of repetition. So let's keep going. We need to do another 5. All right, so number 6. Number 6, we're going to say looks like a cherry. Okay, so we've got the rounded portion of the 6 here representing like the actual cherry, and then the stem coming over the cherry like the hook coming over the 6. Right, so 6 is a cherry. Visualize a cherry. Number 7 is the lightning bolt, and we can actually see a few lightning bolts here. We've got one here, one here, one here, maybe a backwards one here. All right, so number 7 is the lightning bolt, okay? Number 8 is the racetrack. We've got the very scary racetrack here because of this intersection in the middle. I would never drive on this racetrack ever. I don't think anybody else would either. I mean, this is really dangerous, this intersection. Some people call it the infinity racetrack or the forever racetrack. But the point is we see a number 8, again, we see a very scary racetrack. Okay, number 9. Number 9 is a balloon. So we've got the rounded portion of the balloon up top with the string coming under the balloon here. So rounded part is like the round part of the 9. This string is like this hook coming under the 9. So number 9 is our balloon, and 10, excuse me, is our spoon and our plate. Okay, so number 1 is obviously representing the spoon and 0 is the plate. Okay, here we go. We're going to try to recall numbers 6 through 10. So number 6, if you can remember number 6, go ahead and drop it in the chat. Number 6 is the cherry. Very good. Let me turn on my camera so you guys make sure I'm not cheating. I'm not, but just in case. Number 7 is the lightning bolt, right? Very good. Number 8, if we're visualizing the number 8, we are visualizing a very scary racetrack, right? Awesome. Number 9, when we think about the number 9, we're thinking about the balloon, right? Awesome. And 10, we are talking about the spoon and the plate, right? Or the place setting. So that is 10, the spoon and the plate. Very, very good job. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Payal. Thank you, Nivadita. We appreciate I see your comments coming in. Thank you so, so much. I appreciate that. You guys are doing a great, great job this morning. I love seeing all this interaction. This is great. Awesome. So that's 50% of the job. Here we've got our success, baby. You all get a great job. And even if you're not participating, you're just listening, it's okay too. It's good. Good job for you. We're doing something, you know, some professional development this morning or something like that. Okay, so now we are going to associate the topic that is on hand with everything we have memorized up until now. Okay, so our topic is brain rules. And remember, we have to keep it weird. So this is where we need to make it weird, okay? If you thought that the pegs were weird, no, we're about to hit another level of weird here. So we have to create like mini scenarios or mini stories, weird stories with what we have here, okay? So we've got our pencil, we've got exercise. Now we have to come up with a weird scenario. So let's say you decide to go to the gym. You remember you had made a New Year's resolution to go to the gym, and it's May, and you haven't gone to the gym not once, but you know, better late than never, right? We still have like 6 months, 7 months to go in the year, so you know, we could still be successful with our New Year's resolution if it was to get healthier. This is fine. So you decide to go to the gym, and when you get there, you're like, this is weird because everyone is working out with giant pencils, and you're like, where's the workout equipment? What's going on here? Is this like a boutique gym or what is this? And you see everybody working out with these big giant pencils. So instead of using like the Olympic size bar, they're using a huge pencil. The weights are pencils. Everything is pencil themed. You're like, oh, okay, right? Number two is the swan, and number 2 in brain rules is survival. So maybe you can think of a swan that is swimming in a lake, and he's trying to tell you that he is not going to survive in that lake because people have thrown so much garbage, and he's aware of it too, right? And he's like trying to strike up a conversation with you, and he's like, hey man, where are you joining me from? Where are you from? Are you from Chicago? Are you from somewhere else? Do you think I could move to a lake by you? Because look at this is just awful. And you're like, amazed that the swan is talking, but also that he's aware of all this garbage floating around in his house, and he's so concerned about it, you know. So this poor swan, he just relays to you that he is struggling to survive. Okay. Number 3 is wiring. Okay. Number 3 is wiring. And we've got the McDonald's sign here. So I don't know if this happens to you, but it does to me a lot, where I go to McDonald's to buy like a McFlurry and the machine is never working ever. So that's pretty annoying. And it's actually a very common thing in the US. For some reason, the cleaning function on these McFlurry machines, they break down a lot, which, you know, I sympathize with them, but it's annoying when you want a McFlurry. Anyway, maybe you visit a McDonald's one day and you walk in and none of the lights are on and none of the machines are working, and you go in and you're like, hey, are you guys open? Like, what's happening? And they say, you know what, I'm sorry, we're not accepting orders right now because overnight it looks like the rats, they chewed through the wiring, so none of the machines work. And there's some rats right there that are holding the wires, and they just chewed right through them. Okay. Number 4 is the upside down chair. And number 4 is attention and brain rules. So maybe we can visualize sitting in a classroom, in a boring classroom, hopefully not this one, but maybe you remember a teacher once upon a time that was really, really boring. You know, you just knew every time you went to his class, you'd be taking a nap, right? And so what the thing is, you didn't know that this professor actually had these special chairs installed in the classroom, and they armrests, they actually come alive when you start falling asleep, and they poke you to pay attention. So it's a pretty freaky chair to sit in, but again, you know, it is what it is. This professor is dedicated. And number 5 is our pirate's hook, and we've got short-term memory. So maybe we can picture some short baby pirates that are suffering from short-term memory loss, right? And the poor things, they have no idea. They're literally on top of the treasure. But again, they're suffering from short-term memory loss, so they don't know. Okay. All right. Let's try to remember numbers 1 through 5. Okay. So I will give you the peg, and then you will give me the brain rule. All right. Here we go. Number 1. Number 1 is the pencil. And what was associated with this pencil? We're thinking exercise, right? We're thinking people working out with giant pencils. Very good. Number 2 was the swan. And what was happening with the swan? The swan was talking to us. He said something about not being able to survive, right? So that was number 2, survival. Number 3 was the sideways McDonald's sign, and we are thinking about the rats that chewed through the wiring, right? Disgusting. Ugh. Number 4, we're thinking about a backwards chair, upside down chair. And what was going on with the chair? Oh yes, we were sitting in a chair and we fell asleep in a class with a boring teacher, and then the armrest came alive and they poked us, right? So that was number 4, and number 5 was our pirate's hook. And when we're thinking about the pirate's hook, we're thinking about the short baby pirates that were suffering from short-term memory loss. Okay, very good job. So that was the first 5. We have to do another 5 now. You guys are doing a great job. Let me see here. Thank you, Mohammed and Payal and Nivaditha. I hope I'm pronouncing your names correctly. Thank you so much. I see everything you're dropping in the chat, just toggling between 2 different screens, but thank you. I see it. You all are doing a tremendous job. We are almost done. We're about 75% of the way there. Okay. Number 6 is the cherry. Okay. And the cherry, we're tying it into long-term memory. So let's see here. Long-term memory, we've got a cherry with a very long stem. And so we can maybe visualize some cherries with very long stems. We go to the grocery store and we're like, wow, what are they using in the cherry farm? This These cherries have really long stems. How long? This long. Check that out. I've never seen a cherry with the stem that long, but I don't doubt that doesn't exist, right? This is just coming from our imagination. So who knows, right? Maybe one day they will genetically modify the cherries and make them have some really long stems like that. Okay, so long stem, long-term memory, okay? Number 7 is sleep, and it's the lightning bolt. So we're tying in the lightning bolt. Maybe you have a friend or family member that is not a morning person, and so you decide to buy them an alarm clock because you're just so sick of them being late all the time. And so you buy them this alarm clock that every time they try to hit the snooze button, it actually electrocutes them instead of turning off. So they do not sleep anymore. Pretty wild way to wake up in the morning, right? By the way, I don't know if that exists, so don't look for it, please. This was just, again, something that came out of our memory, out of our imagination. I'm sorry nobody here at Iris Reading, I think, has ever been electrocuted intentionally. So just wanted to put that out there. Number 8 is the racetrack, and number 8 in brain rolls is stress. We talked about this being a very scary racetrack here, right? So because of that intersection. So maybe we can visualize some stressed out NASCAR drivers, and the poor things still have a million laps to go, and they're all freaking out because of this intersection, right? Somebody's gonna crash. It's inevitable. Number 9 is the balloon, and number 9 in brain rules is sensory integration, right? So we're talking about all the senses right now, touching, tasting, smelling, right? So maybe we can visualize a balloon that has each of the, like a hand, a tongue, a nose, and it's inside the balloon. So like this. Or maybe we can visualize balloons in the shapes of these body parts. Gross. And 10, we've got our spoon and our plate, we've got vision. So maybe we can visualize going to a restaurant, and we're so hungry that we don't even look at the menu. We're just like, can you just bring me whatever? I am starving. And the waitress is like, sure. So they go to the kitchen, and a couple moments later, they come out with a beautiful assortment of eyeballs. And you're like, you said whatever. And you're like, not this. I meant more like a cheeseburger or something else, right? And you see this beautiful assortment of eyeballs, and they're still moving maybe, and they still got the optic nerve. Oh my God, I'm getting goosebumps just saying this. The optic nerve is like sticking out of the eyeball, and gross, right? So again, we wanted to make these scenarios weird, because if it's weird, it stays in your memory for longer. All right, so now let's try to remember numbers 6 through 10. So I'll give you the peg, you give me the brain roll. Okay, number 6 was the cherry, and what was happening with this cherry, it had a very long stem, right? Number 7 was the lightning bolt, and what was happening with the lightning bolt? Oh, it was sleep, right? Because our friend didn't want to wake up in the morning, so we got him an alarm clock that electrocutes him to get out of the bed. So sleep. That was number 7. Number 8 was the very scary racetrack with the very scary intersection, which meant that the NASCAR drivers were stressed out about having to drive on this race, right? Or in this race. That was number 8. Number 9 was the balloon, and we were talking about, balloons in the shapes of all the senses. So a tongue balloon, an eyeball balloon, a hand balloon. So that's sensory integration. And 10 was our spoon and our plate. So when we were thinking about the spoon and the plate, we were thinking about sitting in the restaurant, and the waitress brought us a plate full of eyeballs. Ugh. Right? And they were still moving, and so that was supposed to represent vision. There you go. And that is how you memorize using the numeric peg system, okay? We just have 10 of them committed to memory, but we're not done yet. We still have to tie in 2 more. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Nivaditha. Thank you, Prayal. Woo, look at all of that. You guys are doing a tremendous job. I appreciate it. Very, 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 very good job. I hope that you're enjoying this method. This is very, very good when needing to memorize things in a specific order. Okay, we do have to tap into like an extra aspect of numeric peg. So we only are able to do 10 at a time here. Okay, but we have 12 brain rules. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I see your I see memory making is fun. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of the smiley faces. I appreciate that. Okay, so we need to now tap into the something extra with the numeric peg, and that is for anything over 10. So this will apply to numbers 11 to 20. We do need to do this again because we have 12 brain rules. So what we're going to do is, because of this, we first have to create a visual rule or a theme. It feels like it's always snowing in Chicago, so we're going to use snow as our theme. We're going to tie in the pencil, snow, and the topic, same with 12. We've got the swan, the snow, and our topic. Our final 2 topics will be music and exploration. So we've got 11 with the pencil, snow, and music. When I think of music, I think of maybe Wolfgang Amadeus, right? And I think of him composing something outside or listening to a composition of his outside with his Walkman, and he is pretending to conduct a phantom orchestra. Instead of using a baton, he's using a pencil, and it's snowing. Kind of like this, right? Which is weird because obviously he wouldn't have had access to a Walkman. I don't even think that number 2 pencils existed in his time, and it's a rather weird thing to just stand outside in the snow, unless he liked the snow, right? Number 12, we've got our swan, we've got snow, we've got exploration. When I think of exploration, I think about Christopher Columbus, for example, and he's in a giant swan-shaped ship exploring what he thought would be the Americas, but it turns out he ended up in Antarctica. And he's obviously cold, it's snowing, you see Burr on top of him, right? So the poor thing ended up in Antarctica, and he's like, I don't think this is how the story was supposed to go, right? All right, very good. So let's do a quick pop quiz. I'm gonna throw two numbers your way, or 2 chapter numbers your way, and then you can let me know what the brain rule was, okay, associated with this. So if you can remember what the brain rule was for chapter 4, go ahead and drop your answer in the chat. So number 4, we got to go all the way back. Number 4 was an upside down chair. And what was happening with this upside down chair? We stopped paying attention, right? And because of that, the armrest came alive and they poked you. So that was number 4, attention. We'll do one more, number 8, chapter number 8, okay? And chapter number 8, let's see, when we think of an 8, we think of a racetrack, right? We think about that scary intersection in the middle. So we think about the NASCAR drivers that were stressed out about having to drive on this racetrack. So that was stress, okay? Very good job for everyone that participated. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate them in the chat. Y'all have done a tremendous job this morning. Remember that you can recycle the pegs in this numeric peg system. So number 1 can always be a pencil, number 2 can always be a swan, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you don't have to rememorize anything. You can keep that. It's like a free gift for today's class. You can take it for free, okay? This is our iris method one last time. And I actually have a discount code for you all that have stuck around. I appreciate your support, or we appreciate your support here at Iris Reading. Any questions, I am going to ask that you send them to me, and I'll share my email in just a moment. Please do not forget about our social media. So again, we're on Instagram, we are on TikTok, we are on Facebook. If you enjoyed the presentation, we'd appreciate if you stuck around and maybe hit the like or subscribe button to our channel, please and thank you. We appreciate that. My email, if you have any questions, if you want a copy of today's presentation, whether that be the slides, or maybe a tip sheet, I can send that to you. If you send me an email at cynthia@irisreading.com, I can get that to you. Also, if you would like to take any of our courses online, any of our advanced courses, you're more than welcome to use a discount code for that was prepared for all of you in attendance today. So if you use the code BOOKLOVERS in all lowercase letters, you'll get 30% off any of the courses on our website. So with that, we'll wrap up today's presentation. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to send them to cynthia@irisreading.com. And I hope to see you all in a future session, everyone. Thank you for stopping by. See you later.